purpose of this problem is to prepare a production cost report. We're told that Rivera Company has several processing departments. Costs charged to the assembly department for November 2017 totaled $2,304,700. We're given a breakdown regarding those costs in terms of beginning inventory, the materials, labor, and overhead. The production records show that 35,400 units were in beginning work in process, 30% complete as to conversion costs, and 662,600 units were started into production, and 25,400 units were in ending work in process, 40% complete as to for conversion costs. Materials are entered at the beginning of each process. The first part of this problem requires that we determine the equivalent units of production and the unit production costs for the assembly department. To start this problem, we will first deal with the units to be accounted for as well as the units accounted for. To begin, we know that the work in process on November 1st was 35,400 units, and that the units started during November were 662,600 units for a total of 698,000 units. Then, in terms of units to be accounted for, we know again that the total has to be 698,000. We see above that there were 25,400 units in ending work in process, and so that units transferred out during the period must have been 672,600. Using this information and the information above, we now can determine the equivalent units. First of all, with regard to the units transferred out, those units would have been complete with regard to both materials and conversion costs. So we'll enter the 672,600. Regarding the ending work in process, the work in process on November 30th, we know that it was complete with regard to materials because the materials are entered at the beginning of the process. So that gives us total equivalent units for the materials of 698,000. Regarding the conversion costs, we're told that the ending work in process was 40% complete with regard to the conversion costs. And so if we take the units of 25,400 times 0.4, we get 10,160. And so our total equivalent units would be 682,760. Next, we need to compute the cost per unit. We can use the information above as well as the equivalent units that we just determined in order to arrive at the cost per unit. First, we need to enter our costs. And so we can see above that for the materials, the beginning work in process materials cost was 78,700. During the period, we added another 1,605,400 of materials. For the conversion costs, the beginning work in process had 48,100 in conversion costs. And then during the period, we incurred labor and overhead as shown, and that the sum of those two amounts is 572,500. So in total, we've got 1,684,100 and 620,600. Now we can divide each of those by the equivalent units that we previously calculated. So divided by 698,000 gives us $2.41, and divided by $682,760 gives us 91 cents. The next part of this problem requires that we complete the schedule for costs accounted for. We start with the cost of the goods that were transferred out. We know that there were 672,600 goods transferred out, and so we need to price those units. Those units were complete with regard to both materials and conversion costs, and so we'll take the 241 plus the 0.91, which is the sum of both the materials and the conversions costs, to price that out, and we get a total of $2,233,032. Next, we need to determine the costs of the work in process. So first of all, for the materials, again, we can see above that for the work in process, the units to be accounted for in the ending work in process is 25,400 units. And the cost that we previously determined per unit for the materials is $2.41. So that will give us 61,214. Now, with regard to the conversion costs, we have equivalent units of 10,160. We determined that previously, and again, that was because the 25,400 units are only 40% complete with regard to conversion costs, so that gives us the 10,160. So we'll have 10,160 times the price that we determined per unit, which is 0.91, gives us 9,246. The sum then for the ending work in process is 70,460, and the sum of the goods transferred out plus the ending work in process is 2,303,492. The next part of this problem requires that we prepare a production cost report for the assembly department. To begin, we're asked to fill out the units to be accounted for and the units accounted for. So we know that from the information above, the beginning work in process had 35,400 units, and that during the period we started into production 662,600 units. So the total units to be accounted for is 698,000 units. That then also will be the units accounted for, 698,000. We're told that in ending work in process there were 25,400 units, and so units transferred out during the period were 672,600 units. Next, we need to fill out the equivalent units information, which we calculated again previously. We know that for the units transferred out, they were complete with regard to both materials and conversion costs. So that would be 672,600 for each. Then, with regard to the ending work in process, these 25,400 units were 100% complete with regard to materials. So that's 25,400. And as we calculated previously, we know that the ending work in process was only 40% complete with regard to conversion costs. 0.40 times 25,400 is 10,160. So if we sum these, we again get 698,000 for the materials, and we get 682,760. And those were all calculations that we did previously in the previous parts as well. The next part of the schedule requires a calculation of unit costs, which we did in an earlier part of this problem. Recall that in determining the total cost for the materials, we added the cost of the materials in the beginning work in process plus costs incurred during the month, and that was $1,684,100. For the conversion costs, we had the conversion costs that were incurred in the beginning work in process, plus the labor and overhead that was incurred during the month, and we said that was a total of $620,600. So the total costs incurred were $2,304,700. The equivalent units that we calculated previously were 698,000 and 682,760. If we divide the cost by the equivalent units, as we did earlier, you get 2.41 as your unit cost for materials and 0.91 as your unit cost for conversion costs. The sum of those two then would be $3.32. Next, we need to complete the cost to be accounted for. The work in process on November 1st, we can see above, was $126,800. The costs incurred during the period were the sum of $1,605,400, the labor and the overhead. Those three costs combined were $2,177,900. And so the total cost to be accounted for was $2,304,700. So then to reconcile that for the goods transferred out, as we did here above, for the goods transferred out, we took the number of units that were transferred out, multiplied it times the unit cost, which was the 3.32, and that gives us $2,233,032. Then, as you can see above, for the work in process, we broke it into two parts, the materials and the conversion costs. The materials, we took the number of units in work in process, which was 25,400, times the unit cost of 2.41, and that gave us the 61,214. And then for the conversion costs, recall that we took the 25,400 units times 0.40, and that times the 0.91 gives us 9,246. The sum of those two amounts then is 70,460, and the sum of the ending work in process plus the cost of the goods transferred out gives us the $2,303,492. So again, the information in this final schedule agrees with the work that we did in the previous part, solving for the information for the costs of goods transferred out.